Welcome to Pregnant Possibilities, and I am Jean Schumacher. I am co-founder of the Pregnancy Advantage, where we help women to get their bodies pregnant ready, or help if you're having trouble conceiving, especially before you go down that in vitro fertilization rabbit hole. And my partner is Dr. Deborah Shapiro, who is a board-certified OBGYN, and she just got certified in what, Deborah?
Lifestyle medicine.
Excellent. Well done to you, because that was big, and I know that you were studying for that forever. And today we have a very, very special guest, Dr. Barnard, who is the founder of the Barnard Medical Center and president of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and which is now offering plant-based telemedicine. So Deborah, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Barnard. Thank you for being with us today. I just want to take a minute and just make certain that whoever is listening now or whoever listens later really understands just how special it is that we have Dr. Barnard here. He has authored over 100 clinical studies and published 20 books. At least. His team at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine is creating cutting-edge research tools like the organ on a chip to replace the need for animals in research labs. They have worked tirelessly to eliminate the use of dogs in every medical school curriculum in North America. They're doing expertly designed clinical research on plant-based diets, contributing to the ever-expanding body of proof. And the Barnard Medical Center offers instructional classes, including education for practitioners and full-service primary medical care. Please check out their website at pcrm.org. And Dr. Barnard is live online with his staff every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time to give an update about what is most critical for the week and everything that they're doing. So if you want to keep up with what PCRM is doing, they've been in existence for 35 years, which is very exciting. And I would please look up www.pcrm.org. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I know you're very, very busy and sharing your knowledge. I would like to start with a question that's on everybody's mind right now, I believe, and that is about the COVID-19 vaccine. Because we are in the middle of this horrific pandemic, which is stretching everybody's resources, both emotional and physical and medical. And this we're just about to have this the Pfizer vaccine, and then later the Moderna vaccine, and maybe other vaccines on the horizon being offered to people here. And I'm wondering if you have any reservations yourself about the vaccine. There's a lot of sort of tweets and comments online about the vaccine, especially coming from the vegan community. So I wondered if you could speak to this a little bit.
Well, first of all, thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Jean, for including me in today's program. The work you do is so important, getting the word out to so many people, and it's just so empowering, and I'm delighted to be with you. But about the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine is the first one that's kind of over the finish line. And to make it simple, it works. When you do a clinical trial, you split the research participants into the vaccine group and the placebo group. Hopefully a lot of people, 30,000 people, 15,000 in each group. And then you just wait to see who gets COVID. And you don't know who's in which group. They don't know, you don't know. And so in the Pfizer trial, there were 170 people who got COVID. Then you break the blind. You try to see, okay, how many of them were placebo, how many vaccine? Because if it's kind of 50-50, your vaccine is a waste of time. That wasn't the case. 170 people got COVID, 8 of them were in the vaccine group, 162 in placebo. What that means is it's not perfect, but it is as close to perfect as a vaccine is likely to get. It really does, at least over the short run, dramatically reduce the likelihood of getting COVID. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, what about the really bad cases, severe cases? There were 10. 9 of them were placebo. 1 of them was vaccine. So once again, it really works. And then with regard to safety, in the trial, the adverse events were pretty mild. And it was fatigue, it was headache, but it was just a few percent, 3-4% of people who had enough fatigue that it really interfered with their life. If you ever had a shingles vaccine, it can take the stuffings out of you for a couple of days. And the COVID vaccines seem to be much better tolerated. Here's the two big issues, though, Deborah. The first one is, this is a challenging vaccine to even distribute. You're not going to get it this calendar year. It's going to take time to roll out, and it goes to healthcare professionals, it goes to people in nursing homes and so forth. But even to healthcare professionals who are involved in routine care, they're not going to see it for a little while. It has to be stored at -70 degrees in a freezer. You don't have that kind of freezer. Walgreens and some other places are going to get kitted out with them so they can distribute this, but it's a big job. And once you crack open the pack, it's got to be used rapidly. It doesn't survive very long. Now, the coming soon, though, is Moderna, and the Moderna vaccine, similarly effective. Very, very effective. A little bit more side effects, and more fatigue, more muscle aches, headaches, but still not too bad. And you can keep it in a regular freezer. So that's looking better. But the big issue is the one that you raised, which is, are people going to object to it and not take it? And a survey just recently came out, and it looked at different demographic groups, and whites and Asians in general said, for the most part, they said, I'll roll up my sleeve. Fair enough. But among blacks, it was about 50-50. In other words, about half of surveyed black participants in these surveys said, I don't trust it. And the question is why? And they would give two reasons. The first is, I don't trust its long-term safety. Secondly, you've been rolling this out really quickly. Those should not be, in my view, should not be dismissed. I think overall this vaccine is going to be extremely helpful, but I think it's a mistake if caregivers become cheerleaders and say there's no issue, there's nothing to worry about, just go ahead and roll up your sleeve and just take it, don't ask any questions. I think we've really got to look at it. We don't know what it'll do over the long run. We have every reason to think it will be safe, but blacks who have been surveyed will remember the Tuskegee experiments and many others where black research participants were abused severely, and in some cases died as a result of unethical behavior on the part of the medical research community. Second, you've got billions of dollars here. And in fact, until recently, there was a big political issue of the current administration obviously wanted to say the vaccine's going to work and you can go back to church and go back to malls and do all these things and don't worry. And so people understandably wanted to filter out the truth of all of this. So bottom line, I think it's going to be safe, but we will certainly know more as we go forward. And once you're using it, not in tens of thousands of people, but in millions of people, there's no question you will see adverse effects that we have not predicted now, but we hope they will be rare and hopefully not life-threatening.
Thank you, thank you. Already in England, they had just a couple of cases of people who had anaphylactic reactions, and now they now say that they're not going to be offering the vaccine to people who have already had anaphylactic reactions and severe allergic reactions to other things. So
the Pfizer vaccine is mRNA, messenger RNA, and it's wrapped in a little bubble that allows it to survive in your body for long enough to get to its target. And so you could imagine a person who is allergic to lots and lots and lots of stuff. Allergic reactions can be unpredictable. They were not predicted in the pre-delivery toxicity trials, but they're there, and frankly, it's to be expected.
These are multi-use vials. I think right? So there may be some mercury in them as well. Do you know, or I don't know?
I don't know, but nothing would surprise me. The vaccine world, I have to say, though, has been moving forward in a generally good way. Here at the Barnard Medical Center, we use vaccines that no longer use eggs. They were derived so that people with egg allergies could skip them. But if a person says, look, I'm leaving the eggs out of my life anyway because I don't like the way the chickens are used, and it's an astounding number that's used to produce the old-fashioned vaccines. So we use the newer ones and that are free of that. And I think that's what we're going to be seeing with COVID too.
Fantastic. So you may have some reservations about sort of long-term safety. We just don't have that data yet. But in general, for vegans, you wouldn't be able to say vegans should not get this vaccine on ethical grounds because of the use of animals or would you? Or I don't know.
I would not say that. Now, by law, every vaccine is tested on animals before it goes into human trials. That's a law. You're not going to change that. It doesn't matter how clean your product is. The FDA is just not going to let it go forward. That should not be a reason to not take the vaccine.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barnard. You're just so wonderful the way you explain things. It's always a pleasure. And I think there's just so much clarity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So well, let's talk about something else. This pandemic, let's put that aside and go back to this is an old question because I hear it all the time. It's old, it's an oldie but a goodie. It never goes away. It's about soy. So I still hear from patients and people that I meet anywhere, oh, I can't have soy, I shouldn't have soy, soy is bad, soy is going to cause cancer. I had cancer, I can't have soy, my doctor said I can't have soy. And I know it's not true, but I'm hoping that you can just sort of illuminate this for people. So maybe we can actually put it to bed.
Soy products clearly are related to cancer risk, but not in the way that the worried patient thinks. Researchers have looked really quite carefully at this. And you select populations that eat a lot of soy, like Asian Americans, where mom and dad taught them to have tofu and soy milk and miso, part of their routine. And those people who have the most soy products, women who have the most soy, have roughly 30% less risk of breast cancer compared to women who avoid soy. And that has been really quite a consistent finding. We knew this really a long time ago. It was 2004. Where we had a pretty good meta-analysis of 8 prior trials that showed really quite definitively soy prevents breast cancer to a substantial degree. And then about 10 years after that, oh, good heavens, we ended up with probably close to 50 trials, and the results are quite consistent. And then for women previously diagnosed with breast cancer, they too have about a 30% reduction in the likelihood of dying of their cancer. So soy doesn't cause cancer, it does quite the opposite. It reduces the risk of getting it and the risk of dying of it.
And the reason is?
Well, first of all, it's important just to know that these are the associations that we see. The reason probably is, or a good way to think of it, is that you have on a breast cell and on the cells of all your body, more than one kind of an estrogen receptor. Breast cells have alpha receptors, other cells have beta receptors. And I like to think of alpha as the gas pedal and beta as the brake. The soy attaches preferentially to beta, so it gives you the benefits without the risks. By the way, for men, same story. With regard to prostate cancer, again, roughly 30% less.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. And there's more of an effect if you feed your children soy milk as opposed to dairy milk. From a very young age, they will see an even greater reduction in later breast cancer, correct?
Yes, yeah, the effects do seem to be the strongest in those who had it early in life. It's optional, you don't have to have it, but it doesn't cause cancer, it does quite the reverse. And I have to say that if a person is replacing cow's milk or cow-based cheese with soy milk or soy cheese, not only are they getting the benefit of soy, they're also getting away from the risk of the milk. Data that came out late spring 2020 showed that women consuming a fair amount of cow's milk have as much as a 50% increased risk of breast cancer. So the hormones in dairy, I've got to say, those are the ones that people should be really worrying about.
Exactly. And the saturated fat as well, since it's a huge...
Well, saturated, yes, there's a lot to not like in dairy.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the hormones that are used in meat and dairy, because you probably know a lot more about this than I do about, they actually implant some of these hormones as pellets into the animals. So what do you think about some of these hormones and their effects? What do you know about?
Well, you go out into the field and you pull out back the cow's ear, and there's a little pellet that's been injected, and it contains either, quote, natural or synthetic sex hormones. I'm talking about testosterone and estradiol and progesterone, or synthetic versions of these, and they are not done for health. Nobody thinks that this cow is going to be healthier or that you are going to be healthier eating the meat. They do it because they've discovered that you get more meat per unit feed when you modify the hormonal structure of the animal in a significant way. Does this matter? Probably yes. There was a big study at Rutgers where they looked at girls and at little girls, like 9 years old, 10 years old, and what they tracked was whether these hormones would end up in them. Because the farmers would say, no, it's just a trace, it can't possibly get into your hamburger. Well, they did. They found in about 1 in 5 girls you saw levels of it's a chemical called zeranol, and another one that's similar, zearalenone, ended up in about 55%, roughly half the kids. So it does show up. But I want to tell you, though, it's not just the hormones you give to the animals that have an effect. An even bigger effect is the hormones the animals make themselves. Cows are metabolizing beings, and each one is as big as a sofa. And so they're making estrogens in their own body, and they get into the milk and into other products that they make. And you're consuming them. And despite the fact that it's only a trace in the dairy, it is sufficiently active to increase cancer risk, the risk of fertility issues, all kinds of other problems.
Right. And it's amazing that you talked about this early, the studies that went back even to 2004. And then why are we still having doctors tell, and oncologists even, telling their cancer patients that they can continue their dairy and not have soy? It's a little bit insane.
But yeah, it is. Part of it is well-meaning. You know, if you're undergoing chemotherapy, everything tastes weird, just eat whatever you can get down, it'll give you calories. But then we discovered some of those calories are going to kill you if it's the wrong stuff. When a person is undergoing cancer treatment, you need to do everything you can to support the healing of that body, particularly if it's being assaulted by radiation chemotherapy. And so the whole idea of, just eat some ice cream, whatever you can shove down your esophagus, that's just great, just take it. That's really a mistake in my view. It does mean working to find what is healing that the person can deal with. But there are healing foods, and they should be front and center.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you for that.
Dr. Barnard, fat cells. I've always thought of them as just this big lump of fat. But in reality, they're kind of busy hormone factories. So the more fat you have, the more hormones you're going to be producing. So being overweight, is this going to impact fertility? So does being thinner, is this better? Is there a sweet spot? Can you talk to us about that?
Thinner is better, and yes, there is a sweet spot. And what you said is right. People think of body fat as sort of innocuous, but fat cells make estrogens. In fact, they convert, in men and women, they convert other hormones into estrogens, and they go into your blood, and they do all kinds of mischief. So if you have less body fat, generally speaking, fertility gets better. But in the same way as you don't want to be really overweight, you also don't want to be severely underweight. What we look at is body mass index. Not perfect, but it's a way of tracking weight and adjusting for how tall you are. And what we often say, a little bit arbitrarily, is that between 18.5 and 25 is a healthy weight range. But if you look where fertility is really at its max, it's right around 18.5, 19, up to maybe 21. And then once you get up to 23, 24, you're still in what we're going to say is a healthy range, but you start to see infertility kind of creeping in. So I'm going to say the sweet spot is between just roughly 19, 20, 21, somewhere in there. If you're 16, 15, into anorexia zone, you can have the ovaries could shut down, and you don't want to be there either.
And you think about that there's a lot of people having trouble getting pregnant on both sides, you know,
Right.
of the BMI.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. Well, that's part of why a plant-based diet is good, because it helps counteract the risk of excess weight gain. But also you're eating regular food. You're not starving the pounds off. You can lose weight on a 600 calorie a day diet, but that's a really unhealthy way to get there.
And who wants to, honestly?
And who wants to? Who can do that for more than, well, people do. People do all kinds of things, and plant-based diet is the gentle way to get to your healthy weight.
Absolutely. Well, okay, changing topics. In order to maximize milk production, cows are artificially inseminated every year. And so during their pregnancy, the cows produce estrogen. Is this estrogen having an impact on us and perhaps us getting pregnant?
Yeah, very likely. Just as you said, the cows are artificially inseminated every year. The gestation in a cow lasts about 9 months, and they are milked well into their pregnancy. So most of the milk that a person would ever drink, if they're drinking cow's milk, most of it comes from a pregnant cow. So it has some estrogen and it has some traces of progesterone. But to tell you the truth, what might be even bigger than that is and this will surprise people, is sugar. Sugar in milk. And people are like, what are you talking about? Sugar in milk? It's the main nutrient of a glass of milk. Send it to a laboratory. They're going to say, you know what's in here? Lactose. There's more lactose than anything else. Lactose breaks down to your body to produce two smaller sugars, one of which is galactose, which has been under investigation for the longest time because it appears to be toxic to the ovaries.
Regarding the galactose, because I think it's fascinating. I believe that you had said that galactose is toxic to the ovaries, but also, does this have an effect on male fertility as well?
Yeah, men and women are both affected by dairy. And with regard to the galactose, I think we need more research here to nail this down, but this goes back years. Let me just describe it real quickly. At Harvard University, there's a great researcher named Dan Kramer, who for many years was digging into why infertility was not very democratic. In other words, there are some places where infertility just is not very common. Other places, it's really, really common. Look at, say, Thailand. It's a country where if you look at women who are in their late 20s, then you look at women who are in their early 30s, late 30s, you just don't see this fall off of fertility that you're going to see in Dallas or in Trenton or in Chicago. You look at American women, once they're in their late 30s, they've lost a lot of their fertility on average. That's when your mom is calling you up saying, your clock is ticking, you don't want to wait around. But in a number of Asian countries, the fertility just remains really, really high. So Kramer said, could be dairy, could be the galactose. And so if you put countries on a graph, Thailand, almost no dairy, very high fertility, persistent fertility. Then say Brazil, then say the US and New Zealand, and put all the countries on it. You see this really nice pattern that the more milk women drink, the more rapidly they lose their fertility as their years go by. And the hypothesis is that the sugar, galactose, that comes from the lactose in the milk is attacking your ovary, knocking out the cells. And what has got me especially worried about that is that if you look at other signs of ovarian toxicity, like ovarian cancer, you see the same pattern. Milk, even within a population, take within a European population, milk avoiding women have less ovarian cancer, milk consuming women have more ovarian cancer. I'm going to put my money on it being galactose. So there you go. And with regard to men, you're asking about men. We need more study on this, but there have been a couple of research reports looking especially at cheese. And what you do is you go into a fertility clinic and you get a semen sample from the guys who are in there. And you look at sperm count, you look at sperm morphology, meaning just the shape, and motility, meaning can the little guys swim straight? And all of those seem to be affected by cheese. And you think, well, duh, it comes out of a pregnant cow. It's got estrogen in it. It's got, how is this going to be friendly to a man's sexual function?
Right. And the saturated fat, again, it's interesting for me I'm going to have to look at the data also to see how they can tease apart these different components of cheese. It's all terrible. We think about these other countries that they also have as they get older, not the same increase in blood pressure, right, that we see in America. And that could.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And worse things. If you look at Japan back 1960s, you had very little obesity, very little diabetes, very little breast cancer.
And prostate.
And if there was ever anything that's hormone related, it's breast cancer. And then bring in McDonald's, bring in cheese. It's not, cheesecake is not a Japanese tradition, but all these things came in and you started to see more diabetes, more obesity, and more breast cancer, and also some other things. You started to see depression, mental health issues. And obviously these things can relate to stress and other contributors, but we have pretty good reason to believe that physically when you modify human physiology, we'll start to see the emergence of a number of conditions you hadn't previously seen. And frankly, I think that's what's happening in many of these countries.
They were talking about, I've read that the depression may be associated with something called arachidonic acid, which is sort of a byproduct of the omega-6 fatty acids, which are
right.
And we find mostly in fish and dairy as well, right? And eggs.
Yeah, exactly. You're putting your finger on the inflammatory processes that happen. A decade or two ago, a lot of us became convinced that in the same way as you can induce depression with certain medications, there's antihypertensives in certain cases would cause patients to just go, their mood would just crash. And it's entirely physical effect. You can do the same thing with inflammatory biomarkers, and your diet will produce them in some people. But there's another piece, and that's the gut. Your gut is connected to your brain, and you can change your gut microbiome in 10 days time by either eating bad foods or eating good foods. Either way will adjust it. And it's funny. We did a study with Geico, the car insurance people, and it was a diabetes trial and a weight trial. And a vegan diet helps all those things. But we tracked anxiety, we tracked depression, and we found that those things measurably change.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Agarwal, Uncle Agarwal was doing that part. Oh, I loved her. She's
exactly.
Yes. That study was fantastic, and that gets quoted all the time and referred to all the time. Very important study that you did with Geico about depression. People should realize that, because you feel it in me. I think, like you said, a couple of days, 10 days, when you change to a whole plant food diet, a diet centered around whole plant foods, well, especially organic, to avoid some of the toxins that they put on the plants, you feel better. You do feel better.
Yeah, and I'm happy to say that other researchers have found much the same thing. I think we need more work here, but it's been a long time since we have had more than enough evidence to prescribe this kind of diet.
Yes. Yes.
Well, Deborah, did you have something that you were going to share?
I did. The holidays are around the corner. Actually, Hanukkah, Festival of Lights, Jewish Festival of Lights starts tonight. And often for Hanukkah, we give people small gifts. And I know also in other holidays, people share small gifts as well as larger gifts. And I just wanted to promote this little book. This is not your latest, and it may not be like, the most spine-tingling book, but I love this book, The Vegan Starter Kit by Dr. Barnard. It just makes it so easy to get started, and I love this little book. I love this book. I think it's a wonderful gift to give somebody for the holidays, because if we can make people healthier, we can all be happier and have a better society for all, including the animals that we share it with and the environment that we're all living in. And especially Eugene and I believe, and I know that Dr. Barnard believes this as well, is that if we can improve the health of women before they conceive, then the next generation and the generation after that will be healthier as well. And that's the way we're going to change the world, really. You must take this time in the next 6, 9, 12 months to get your body ready for a pregnancy, emotionally and physically prepared for pregnancy. And we can do that with the Pregnancy Advantage.
Right. And I just have to have a shout out to your last book, Your Body in Balance, because it's probably one of the most incredible books you've done. I mean, all of your books are amazing, but this one in particular just talks about your thyroid and how everything comes back to that, and how your body has to be in balance. It's that homeostasis. So, and in case you need to see the Cliff Notes, because Dr. Barnard was very kind to go and dive deep into this book, and it's a 7-part series on simplyplantbased.net. So it's like the Cliff Notes. So it's an amazing. So Dr. Barnard, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today.
Well, it is a great pleasure. What you are doing is so incredible. And thank you for getting the word out, and also for empowering your people to spread the word to their friends and to their families and loved ones.
And next week on Pregnant Possibilities, we have Dr. Lori Marbus, who's going to be discussing gestational diabetes and how we can avoid that. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
Yes.